Did you know that food can either make your stress levels worse or improve your stress levels? By that, I mean feel calmer. And I don't know about you, but when I'm stressed, at times, all I really want is a slice of cake or maybe an ice cream or a piece of chocolate or maybe a bar of chocolate, depending on how I'm feeling. But what does this do to stress levels? Today, I'm talking to nutritional therapist Nicola Shubrook about this subject. But first, I'm going to ask her what stresses her out on a day-to-day basis.
So the one thing that stresses me out actually is tech. I have very little patience for technology sometimes. Less so around kind of connection dropping, because I think we've all kind of got used to that over the last year, but more trying to keep up with social media and all the changes that those platforms make, because we're supposed to be seen on those platforms, and I just don't have the patience. Yeah, I don't have the patience to work out how to do something, to make a reel or anything. So yeah, for me, I've kind of learned that actually the best thing to do is get somebody else to do it for me. I just pass it on because,
Pass it on.
yeah, it's not my strength.
I've got the same thing, but what I've realized is it's less about patience and more about having time and space. And I usually don't have the time and space, so that manifests as impatience. But if I make time and space, I'm patient. If I don't
you're probably right. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
I think, oh, why am I so impatient? It's because I'm trying to do something complicated into this slither of time. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, delegating when you can, that's just brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, I've started to do that more now. I think at first I saw that as an extra thing, because I'm also somebody who's like, oh, it's easy to do it myself than give it to anyone else. But now, because work is busy, I've kind of started to farm that stuff out and bring in people when I need them to go, do you know what, can you just go off and handle this? Because then it frees me up so much more.
Myself.
I'm a lot calmer around it now.
Okay, so now let's go to the subject at hand, food and stress. So how are they linked?
So food, I would say food is one of the most the biggest mind-altering drugs that you can have. And I know that from my own journey, because that's kind of what led me to be a nutritional therapist. So I used to struggle with anxiety and panic attacks back in my early 20s, whilst I was working in advertising and kind of having a diet that was very much fueled by stress, lack of sleep, lots of sugar, lots of caffeine, lots of alcohol. And so nutritionally, my body and my brain weren't able to get the really key nutrients that you need in order to keep the body optimized, both from blood sugar balancing, which I'm sure we'll come on to talk to, but also the nutrients that my brain needs to perform. So for example, your brain is 60% fat. So if you're not having good fats in the diet, your brain isn't going to be able to perform quite as well. And interestingly, since I've done all my training, which was some 12 years ago now, we're learning also about the gut and the microbiome, which is all of our good bacteria that sits in our gut, and what we call that gut-brain axis. So a lot of our brain chemicals, like serotonin, which is our happy hormone, 95% of that is made in your gut, because you actually need it for motility of the gut as well as to feel happy. So there is an absolute intrinsic link between food and stress, because if you're eating the wrong foods and therefore not getting enough of the right nutrients, that's going to affect your microbiome, and then that's going to have a knock-on effect on your brain and your moods as well.
So there's some really interesting points there, Nicola. You and I both, apart from everything else that we do, we work with eating disorders as well, don't we? And a lot of people think, oh, I can't eat fat, it will make me fat. But there's fat and there's fat, isn't there? So do you want to explain to our listeners what you mean by good fat? So
you're absolutely right. And there's a lot of fear around those foods. And I think there is just anybody who's looking after their health, or they're worried about their cholesterol, or if somebody has a higher sort of BMI and they're looking at any weight loss. So good fats for me are, good nutrition for me is about foods in their natural state. So nothing that's been processed or packaged up to look pretty in any shape or form. So good fats come from natural foods. So that can be anything from avocados to oily fish, so that is your salmon, your mackerel, anchovies, sardines, etc., because they're crucial. They contain omega-3, which is what we call an essential fatty acid. And it's called that because the body can't make it on its own. It has to get it from food sources.
Yeah. So if you're not eating these things, you're going to be depleted and your brain's not going to function.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually heart health is affected as well, and lots of other things.
Even cellular energy, because every single cell in your body has a lipid membrane. So lipid means fat. So, and it's like a protective membrane around the edge of the cells. And we want those cells to be lovely and juicy and bouncing around like healthy grapes almost.
Yeah.
But if you don't have enough of the right fats in the diet, then they start looking like shriveled up raisins or sultanas. So then they're not going to perform as well. So you start to get fatigue. You're going to react more when you're stressed.
Yeah. And the body's not going to be able to function properly, because those cells are there to talk to each other and do the bodily processes that we're unaware of consciously, that help keep us healthy and happy.
Yeah. And those fats are also what we call anti-inflammatory. Yeah. So when stress, one of the downsides of stress is it creates inflammation, particularly if it's long-term stress, and that creates inflammation in the gut. So we need fats in the diet to have some of the anti-inflammatory benefits as well, to just keep everything calm.
Yeah, thank you. And there's something else you said there. Excuse me. You said, I can't remember, you said about the importance of nutrition. But does those ice creams and cakes and chocolate actually have a negative impact on stress directly?
So I think that comes down to how much of it you're eating and how often. So I don't label foods good or bad. I'm like, if you occasionally want an ice cream or a piece of cake or a piece of chocolate, then have it. I genuinely think life is too short not to have those foods. And the more we say, I can't have chocolate, I shouldn't have chocolate, I'm not going to have chocolate, the more you're going to want it, and the more likely you are to then actually overeat on it when you do indulge in it. And then you start that negative cycle of, oh, I shouldn't have done that, I'm useless, I can't do this, and so I'm like, let's cut all that out. I as said, I do think life is too short to not enjoy food for what it is. But when we're really stressed and we're constantly reaching for those foods that are highly processed, full of so trans fats were the other fats that you will find in processed foods, so junk foods or high refined sugars, that is going to negatively sort of fuel stress, because it's going to create that inflammation that I talked about. So probably rewinding a little bit, when we get stressed, we go into fight or flight mode. Yeah. So that's a natural reaction that the body carries out, because actually every second of every day, all your body cares about is keeping you alive. That's all it cares about. It doesn't care what's causing the stress, but it will respond to how you think or perceive stress. So part of that chemical reaction that happens is, so we go, oh my goodness, I'm so stressed. So the body, I point up here because it comes from the pituitary and the hypothalamus. It kicks out cortisol, which is your stress hormone. That then knocks out, that then sends a signal to knock or increase insulin, which is what we need to regulate blood glucose. So blood glucose is your energy that you get in order that our muscles are primed to fight that threat or run away from it. Part of that chain reaction then is that blood flow moves away from the gut, because your digestive system is constantly working 24/7 and it takes up a lot of energy. And actually, when we're in a fight or flight mode, it kind of goes, do you know what? I have not got time to be digesting your breakfast right now, because you've just told me we've got a lot to do today and we're running around and I'm really stressed. Let's move that energy into the muscles and your major organs. So reduced blood flow into the gut then creates more inflammation. We know that stress reduces the diversity and the numbers of the good bacteria in our gut. That's where you start to see things like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. I often see that coming in when somebody's had a really stressful time over a long period.
Yeah. I always ask my clients, are these symptoms worse when you're stressed? And they always say yes. Yeah. And then you know that it has got a stress link.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of has that reaction. So then if you're reaching for a lot more foods that are highly processed, high in refined sugars, and the challenge is we want those foods at that time because we're stressed and the body says, give me more energy.
Yeah.
We're running on adrenaline, we're running on cortisol. So I say what the carb goggles go on, because the body knows that carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are forms of sugar, in order to have energy, if we eat carbs, that energy we get almost instantly, because you're turning a carbohydrate straight away into a sugar as soon as we eat it.
Yeah.
So that keeps you going.
So the reason that craving comes in is because your body needs something to be able to deal with the stress, and it goes for the quick fixes. But those quick fixes actually have negative consequences because they're not the healthy ones.
So whenever we're stressed, we have a high demand for energy because of that fight and flight response.
Yeah.
And it's very easy then, because also we don't have time to think about what we're eating. We're perhaps grabbing on the go, and it's easier to grab a chocolate bar, some crisps. You know, they're easily available foods these days that we can grab. So we are responding in part to the body needing that energy, but we are grabbing the wrong foods most of the time, that the body then needs to be optimally kind of running in that fight and flight response.
So the body needs carbohydrates to manage life. But the foods that we tend to crave are the wrong kinds of carbohydrates. Not that we shouldn't have them, but only in moderation. I like the 80-20. Do you go by that rule?
Yeah, I do, to a certain degree. Yeah. And
So
I think something you touched on there is something that I often ask clients as well, is around, we naturally sometimes crave those foods, biscuits, cakes, ice cream, whatever it is, because we've all got food stories that we grew up with as well.
Yes.
And so when we were kids, they were the things that we were given when we were ill or we were unhappy. You know, most of the time our parents would give us sweets, or I was only allowed sweets on a Friday. You know, it became this treat, this reward. So of course now when we're stressed as an adult,
we want the treat.
We go to those foods.
So there are psychological links as well.
Definitely.
And you know, and a lot of parents actually, to be loving, they say, oh, you had a bad day at school, here's some chocolate. So you know, even you know, at a very young age, that link is made. So it can be very difficult to break that cycle.
And also those foods, those high sugar foods, do light up reward centers in the brain.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's the other challenge. So it has a physiological reaction where we do feel happier because we've had chocolate.
So, and that's what makes it addictive, isn't it? So some people do get very addicted. So what is a good way of getting the carbohydrates that the body needs to be able to manage stress, that doesn't exacerbate that addiction to sugar and all the other stuff?
So for me, it's about, I mentioned it at the beginning, blood sugar balancing. So whenever we eat food, whatever food it is, the body will break it down eventually through the digestive system, and it goes through the gut into the bloodstream to create energy, and that gets turned into blood glucose, which is what fuels the body. So when we fill up on too many carbohydrates, we're going to get a rush of energy. And I always use the analogy of, if I was to give my 7-year-old nephew a can of Coca-Cola, the full fat variety, really high, and it's got 9 teaspoons of sugar or something ridiculous in it. You know, he's not used to that kind of food anyway, so he would drink it thinking it's Christmas. Within minutes he will be high, he will be so full of energy, he'll be hyperactive. But as soon as that Coca-Cola wears off in maybe half an hour, because he's quickly burnt it off as well because he's got more energy, he is going to crash. The rate at which the body will have used that fuel is really quick. He will crash, and then he will be what we call hangry. So he will be emotional, he'll be angry, he'll be irritable, he will be, you know, flying around in a rage, because all he wants is, because he feels rubbish, he wants more sugar. So what we have to do is slow down the release of energy that we get from our food. So putting protein in at every time you eat, I'm always saying to clients, every time you eat, breakfast, lunch, any snacks, dinner, always ask, where's the protein? That can be animal proteins like meat and fish and eggs and dairy products, or it can be more plant-based proteins like nuts and seeds and tofu and hummus and things like that. So because the body still, whenever you eat that protein or the good fats that we mentioned earlier, they're also in this category, the body still has to technically turn that protein or fat into sugar, blood glucose. So that takes a lot longer. So instead of this massive rise in energy from carbs that we then crash from, we get a much slower release of energy that keeps us sustained, and it gradually falls off rather than this kind of peak and trough. If you're really stressed, you don't want your blood sugar levels doing
really not. No. But also when you eat these foods, you're getting nutrition from them. So one of my things when I'm hungry and I really want a biscuit or something, I have almonds, and I don't want the almonds, but I have a few almonds, and actually they are tasty. It's just that I want the biscuit. But I have the almonds that are actually very tasty and extremely satisfying and full of nutrition.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of breaking bad habits. So that's a really nice swap, isn't it?
Yeah. Anytime you're, you know, one of my sort of pet hates is when people say, oh, I can't have fruit because fruit's high in sugar. And I'm like, oh my God, fruit has so many benefits for you. I'm like, please eat your fruit.
I'll have the
have it with
protein, but I
protein.
won't touch the banana.
Yeah, exactly. But have your fruit with protein. So a little bit of yogurt. I might get a handful of nuts. I might even get a couple of squares of dark chocolate.
Yeah.
Because that again is higher in fat and full of antioxidants, and that slows down the release of the sugar from the fruit.
Actually, that's a great, you've just reminded me. I have some chocolate and I forget the name of it, but it's miniature bars like that, dark chocolate with probiotics in there.
Yeah.
And you get, I've got the orange one, and so you're satisfying that urge for chocolate. It's called Osso, I think, OSS.
There's quite a few brands coming through with probiotics in them now.
Really super nice, satisfies a lot of things, portion controlled, feeds your gut, antioxidants.
Yeah, the other side of it is as well. So I used to be that sugar fiend. You know, my breakfast when I used to work in London was going in via a Pret or one of the coffee shops, and I would grab a latte and an almond croissant. You know, the worst thing to be having, caffeine and sugar for breakfast. And then we had this cafe area at work that had, you know, if you wanted something for a snack, you go down and buy a muffin. You didn't buy a pot of Greek, or I didn't pot of Greek yogurt. I'd then have a jacket potato for lunch, which would have me yawning by 2 o'clock. Not that jacket potatoes are bad, but it's too high in starchy carbs to fuel a lunch break. Then I'd be grabbing, I don't know, a bag of crisps or something at 3 o'clock. And then on the way home, I'd be so hungry traveling home from London to get back, I'd have pizza or pasta for dinner. So I would constantly be, and then wine as well, I'd be constantly on the sugar. So your taste buds get used to that level of sugar all the time. Yeah. Which, so when some people say, I'm never eating chocolate again, I'm giving up sugar, it's a really hard battle to do if you are used to putting sugar in your teas, you're used to having, you know, squash with your water. You have to my advice is always up the protein, because that naturally reduces sugar cravings, but start taking the sugar out slowly. Don't try and do this all or nothing approach, because that's based on willpower, and that just doesn't last very long. You only need a stressful event and you'll be back on it again.
Exactly.
Tell yourself off for doing so.
So what are the foods then, Nicola, that people can eat that help during stressful times?
So for me, that protein is crucial. So I always say have breakfast. Some people are like, oh, I don't like breakfast, I don't feel hungry in the morning. I'm like, that could be your adrenals. So your adrenal glands are kind of what kick out the cortisol and the adrenaline. Sometimes if we're not hungry in the morning and we're reaching for coffee, that can actually have a negative effect. So I'm always like, have breakfast, a protein-based breakfast. That could be any form of eggs, any form of yogurt. It could be porridge, and I tend to put in like a scoop of peanut butter or something in my porridge to give it a bit more density to it. It could be, I'm not such a massive fan of toast if it's toast and jam, because that's just going to be carbs. But if you had toast with peanut butter and a banana on it, for example, getting that protein in. So for me, it's how do you start the day well? And all the research shows if you have a good, healthy breakfast in the morning, you are much more likely to make better food choices throughout the day as well. But also you've set the balance of your blood sugars when you wake up. Even if you've had a bad night's sleep, you're starting the day balancing your blood sugars, rather than having a bowl of cornflakes that's going to give you a shot of energy at 9 o'clock in the morning. And by 10 o'clock, you'll have your hand in the cookie jar again going, oh God, I need some more energy. So it's about, you know, as you say, kind of increasing protein and start making those swaps slowly. You know, if you're used to always having a biscuit mid-morning, that's fine. But as you say, maybe you have a little bit of cheese with it, or maybe you have a handful of almonds alongside it. And just start making changes that work for you. Kind of, I think sometimes I always get my clients to just think ahead slightly and think, right, what have I got in the house that could be really useful? I get clients to make jars of trail mix. So just go and buy a load of nuts and some dried fruits, some dark chocolate drops, maybe some popcorn, you know, get some healthy stuff in there, as well as the kind of the everyday stuff like popcorn, you know, that's fine to have. Mix it all in a big jar. And then the trick is, though, to just take out a handful and put it in a bowl and then put the big jar away and then have that as a snack.
Don't have the bowl next to you.
Don't have it next to you while you're working, because you're just going to be mindless eating then. But take out what you need.
Do you know, one of my favorite breakfasts when I'm going out, and there's no reason on earth why I can't do this at home, is sourdough bread with mashed avocado, chilies, and a poached egg.
Oh, lovely.
With a bit of watercress on the top. It's like, oh my word.
Yeah.
And that's so super tasty.
Really filling.
So much nicer than a fry up, which doesn't agree with me very much at all.
Yeah.
And that takes minutes, doesn't it?
And that's the thing with food. It's about, when I'm working with clients, I'm not, whilst they might come to me with a lot of complex kind of health issues going on, it's not about, right, here's 50 things you need to go off and do this week. I just start making changes to what they're already doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that they're much more likely to stick to it. So it could be that I'm saying to them, well, protein normally is one of the first things, protein and hydration. I'm like, right, are you drinking enough water? And how do we get more protein into the diet?
Yeah.
And then when they start doing that, they're like, oh, okay, I'm starting to feel better. Oh, my sugar cravings have gone away. Okay, this is good. And then we kind of move it up from there.
And so you mentioned the W word there, water. Is there a link between hydration and stress levels?
Yeah, definitely. So your body's what, 60% water? And
different numbers, between 60 and 80, I've seen.
Yes, I think it's about 60%. It's a lot. It's more that, yeah, it's a majority of it. So we naturally need water to thrive and survive. So I always say to clients, if you think about those survival programs that we watch, if you watch Bear Grylls, The Island or something like that, you'll see all of them go off into these situations where they have very, very little food for weeks, but it's the water is the one thing that within 2 days, if they don't have enough water, they're really starting to struggle and their health is at risk. So it's the same for us as day to day, even when we're stressed. We all have natural demands for water that we need, but also, again, your brain needs hydration.
Yeah.
So a dehydrated brain, so to speak, is going to feel stressed more easily. Its cognition is going to be really hard. Memory goes down, focus goes down. And also if we're not hydrated, we're not detoxing effectively. Your bowel movements will slow down. You won't be urinating out all the toxins efficiently. So then that starts to clog up and make the whole body underperform as well.
It's so important, and people really struggle with it. So some of my clients say, oh yes, I have a lot of water and I put squash in it. I don't like water, but that's not good either, is it?
I'm quite tough with my clients sometimes. I'm sometimes like, look, you have to drink water to survive. Tough. You're going to have to drink it. Because even though they think, oh, I'm only putting in a small amount of squash. And for me as well now, a lot of these squashes are like, oh, but it's got no added sugars. I'm like, go and read the label. It will say artificial sweetener, the clue's in the name.
Yeah.
We've got to get away from even using artificial sweeteners, which may be safe from a food and health and safety kind of point of view, as well as calories. But artificial sweeteners keep your taste buds sweet.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, look, you can flavor water with fresh limes, fresh lemons, oranges. You can use mints, and herbs like mint and rosemary. And, sometimes even if I'm making a cup of tea, I'll make the tea and then take the tea bag out and put it in my glass of cold water, and then it will still diffuse into the water.
Oh, nice.
I'm still getting the benefits of it.
Good tip.
So I used to do that a lot when I worked in an office. I still do now sometimes, actually.
I actually find water tasty on its own, but I think it's because I just do it and then it becomes like the norm. But if you're used to putting cordial in there, then water on its own is going to taste weird. So maybe using that kind of a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less until you don't need it anymore.
And swap out for fresh fruits and things as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I also find water temperature quite makes a difference. So I hate ice cold water. I'm quite sensitive to temperature. So a really cold drink for me makes me feel cold. So I love room temperature water.
Well, I'm a nutritionist as well, and my training taught me that iced water actually exacerbates anxiety because your body kind of closes a little bit. So I always have mine, and I serve mine to my clients at room temperature because it's more easy on the body.
I think so, but some people love ice cold water. It's the only way they'll drink it. I'm like, fine. Oh, even warm water. My nan, bless, is 99 now. She will still have a mug of like hot water every day.
Yeah.
That's her thing. She'll always have that.
And hot water and lemon first thing in the morning is really good too.
Yeah.
So any other things that are really good to help with stress? So magnesium based foods?
Yeah, magnesium. So magnesium's your body's natural relaxer. So trying to get enough I mean, in theory, we should all get enough magnesium, but when we're stressed, there's normally a higher demand. So it's using things like green leafy vegetables. Your carbohydrates are actually a really good form of magnesium again. So that's going to be really important. I think also I even get clients to do things like Epsom salt baths. You know, having a bath is a relaxing process, but also the magnesium that you can sometimes get from the salts, because they go through the skin rather than something that you have to eat, for example. Your fruits and veggies, you know, eating the rainbow. So we come back to that microbiome, which we're finding out more and more about, and plays an intrinsic role in our stress levels and our anxiety. We need to be feeding that microbiome, and it loves the phytonutrients, the polyphenols that you get in your fruit and veggies, as well as the fiber that kind of helps keep the gut regulated and keep those bowel movements going, because often constipation can be an issue for some people with stress.
Yeah.
So loads of fruit and veggies and loads of colors, because each color represents a different phytonutrient. It's anti-inflammatory, it's a natural antioxidant. So again, when we're stressed, the body creates more toxins. We need a lot of antioxidants to mop up the free radicals that get formed from that stress. So, and that's vitamin C. It's the body's most abundant antioxidant. We're going to need more of it. And the one place you get vitamin C from is your fruit and vegetables. So we want to be getting them in. And I always try and get clients to, if you think of a dinner plate, have half of your plate is vegetables or salad with each meal. Keep your starchy veggies like potatoes in sort of a handful, a quarter of the plate, and then the other quarter is your protein, and just have a, you know, whole food balanced meal. Put a little bit of olive oil or something on to get more good fats in.
It's interesting when you go to restaurants, which we will be able to do one day. You tend to get a lot of carbs and a lot of protein, but hardly any color. Except a little bit of you know, hardly any vegetables apart from a little bit of garnish, maybe.
Yeah, I always ask for extra veg, or even if I was to go to out for a pizza or something like that, I will always get a side salad.
Yeah.
I'm always asking, you know, what's the extra bits that I can add to it every time, no matter where I'd go out for eat.
That's been so helpful. Thanks ever so much.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. I'm sure that people will learn a lot from this.
Good.
What I tend to do now is ask my guests if there is a book that they've enjoyed, that they've found uplifting or inspirational, that others might feel the same way about. So I think you've got one in mind, haven't you, Nicola?
Yes, I have. So my book recommendation is called Super Attractor by Gabrielle Bernstein. And I read this last year, and for me, it was a real game changer when it came to, I mean, it's obviously based on kind of law of attraction, attracting things into your life and getting into a more appreciative state, a state of more gratitude, rather than, let's say it's to do with money, for example, where you're like, oh my God, I'm not making enough money, I've got bills to pay, and getting caught up in the fear. This book was about how you change that state, you change that emotion. You recognize that you're experiencing fear or anxiety, but you reach for the next best emotion. So she talks about this scale. There's an emotional scale, I think it was created by Abraham Hicks, where on a scale of 1 to 20, joy is at the very top and fear is at the very bottom. So if you're stuck in fear the whole time, it kind of can fuel, I think, anxiety within the body as well. But what we're trying to do is recognize, okay, I'm scared about this, or I'm anxious about coming out of lockdown, or whatever it might be. But then you reach for the next best emotion. So it might be, but you know what, I'm really grateful that I've still got my health. Or it might be that, you know, but my cat gives me so much joy. And you just try and reach for another positive emotion, even though you're kind of acknowledging, look, I'm quite scared about stuff, or I feel anxious or stressed. And the way she explains it was, I've probably not explained it as well as her as succinctly, but it just gave me tools to cope with life, with stress.
Yeah, I haven't read that book, but I have read some of her books, and they are very good, aren't they? So the law of attraction, although not directly associated with stress, not that the book recommendation has to be about stress, it does help relieve stress, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. It gives you a different way of coping with stress or life, or a different way of kind of perceiving it. So you're still acknowledging it's there,
Yeah.
but trying to see actually, but there's still all of these other bonuses that we've got. I've still got so much more
Yeah.
that is good, as well as kind of going, okay, I'm still quite scared about this stuff over here. So
Yeah.
it's a really easy read as well.
Yeah.
I really
I
enjoyed
like
it.
those.
Yeah. Yes.
Easy reads. We don't have to make life
Absolutely.
more complicated than it is.
No, exactly.
Okay, thanks so much, Nicola. I do hope everybody's enjoyed this talk as much as I have. If you have, do please like and share. And maybe you want to leave some comments below. Maybe you've got your own stress management tips or healthy eating tips as well. And if you haven't already, do please subscribe. Thank you.